honestly, is the first thing from my mind. I'm just going to, go out there, try to play a great game this week. We have a big, our biggest games are ahead of us. So we got to do a good job, and I got to play quarterback. I got to prepare well, and that's what I'm thinking about.
Tom, someone did the math. You've spent literally half your life now in the NFL. Same number of days on earth in the NFL as before the NFL.
No, that's crazy.
Are you aware of that?
No, that's crazy.
We got way too much time on our hands.
That's crazy. The stats and data is everywhere. It's a data-driven world, but that's crazy. It's hard for me to imagine. So I've loved it. I've certainly, loved my opportunity to play, and it's been a lot of, it's memories and relationships. I've certainly had my fair share of all those.
Don't know much about Tom Brady's future. I doubt that in 8,292 days from now he'll still be playing, but with him you can't rule out anything. That question came up where he said it's the furthest thing from my mind. They asked him what factors he will consider when he ponders whether or not to retire after the season, and he's just not thinking about it. He said the same thing earlier this week on his Let's Go podcast. He's not thinking about it, but he did say the next time he does it, he's not coming back. Now, the cynics would say he was always coming back, that he was just retiring from the Buccaneers. But when there is a retirement the next time, it will be a retirement. He's not going to do this half-step retirement. He's just going to be done, and that's going to be it. And we've all assumed it was going to be after this year, Peter. As we get closer to the end of the season, I'm not assuming anything. And when Rodney Harrison said, after interviewing Tom Brady and talking to Tom Brady, when Rodney Harrison said on Football Night in America on Christmas night, he thinks Tom Brady's going to play next year, but for a team other than the Buccaneers, I put a lot of stock in what Rodney had to say.
I mean, he's not the first person to say that, but obviously because he's Rodney Harrison and the relationship he has with Brady, I think it's significant. I agree that I will just say this. I think if he does play, it will be for a team other than Tampa. I certainly don't think he dislikes Tampa or hates them or anything like that. But I do think the way Brady looks at it, or the way he has to look at it, is, where am I going to have, if I only play one more year, where am I going to have the best chance to win a Super Bowl? Where is that? What place will give me that opportunity? And look, Mike, there's a lot we don't know yet. We don't know what Josh McDaniels and the Raiders are going to do after the season. We think we know, but we don't know, okay? And we don't know if that will be a reunion made in heaven for a 46-year-old quarterback who has had some pretty sketchy moments in, this season, whether they want to cast their lot. Because if that doesn't work, Tom Brady's not the only one out of Vegas at the end of next year. Josh McDaniels will be another one, and there's also the specter of Sean Payton looming over everything. If Sean Payton goes back to the Saints, my guess is that he'd want Tom Brady to come with him and to be his quarterback next year. Or if Sean Payton goes anywhere, I think, barring having a really good quarterback in-house, I would think he would want to bring Tom Brady with him. But those are questions that we can't answer right now because we're not positive that Brady's going to play again. We think there's a good chance he will be, but I'm pretty sure if he plays again, it won't be in Tampa.
I really do think at some level Tom Brady and Sean Payton very much want to find a way to work together. It's just something that they both want on their mutual football resumes, that we spent at least a year somewhere. When you take a guy who is the offensive equivalent of Bill Belichick, who grinds, who studies, who is always staying ahead of the curve and looking for ideas and options that can get the most out of the talents of the players he has, and he's up till 2, 3 a.m. doing it, and it's nonstop, and it's no days off, and Tom Brady, I think, is drawn to that, and Peyton is drawn to Brady. Remember, the year that Brees came back, Drew Brees for one more season, there was some chatter that maybe they were going to try to nudge Brees away and go with Tom Brady that year when Brady was the free agent that went to Tampa Bay. So I have a hard time finding a spot for Sean Payton where he could bring in Tom Brady. You go to Dallas, which if Mike McCarthy makes a horrible coaching decision down the stretch and loses a playoff game to Tom Brady, who knows what Jerry Jones will do? You got Dak Prescott. You go to Denver, you're stuck with Russell Wilson. The Chargers' job isn't going to open up now that they've made the playoffs. It would have been Justin Herbert. The only place other than the Saints, which is definitely a rumor making the rounds of, and I know folks in New Orleans are like, oh, no, that's all, that's not a very non-awkward thing for them to be talking about, given that they have a head coach. But other than New Orleans, Carolina is the only place where you could get Payton and Brady together. And everything I've heard is that Payton and Carolina wouldn't be a thing. But I think that's a huge factor for Brady. And you have to see, with any quarterback carousel, and this year, Peter, it's going to be crazier than ever. I was listing the names yesterday of guys who will be, could be, should be available. There are so many quarterbacks that are going to be out there. But before you can spin the quarterback carousel, the coaching carousel has to come to a rest. Which jobs are open, which coaches go where, then you get some clarity on where the quarterbacks that are going to be available will land.
I mean, there's no question about it, Mike. I agree with you totally. I keep hearing, well, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be able to have his choice of jobs, and Brady could be out there, and Derek Carr is going to the Jets, and all this other stuff. And I keep saying to myself, there aren't enough jobs for the number of quarterbacks and or the number of agents of quarterbacks who believe that their guys are going to have a really good landing spot. Like, for instance, let's take Tennessee. What are the Titans going to do? The Titans have a lot of questions going into the offseason. A lot. They're not in great cap shape. Whoever goes there, if they do end up replacing Ryan Tannehill, my guess is they probably want to. But I also think that's going to be a financial decision. But so if you keep Ryan Tannehill and you're the Tennessee Titans, so don't you want to backstop him right now if you're Mike Vrabel with somebody better than Malik Willis? So those are the kind of questions that we just don't know now. Because, Mike, you raised the issue at the top. For Mike Vrabel to have bypassed Malik Willis to play in this game and perhaps to play next week, for a guy who's been on this team for 15 minutes, it says something resoundingly beyond today. And they can say whatever they want. I have no idea what they said last night or the other day about it, but they can say whatever they want. But the fact is, if you've got a quarterback who has been playing and who's been in the system all year, and you leapfrog somebody over him who, every team in the NFL had a chance to employ on the active roster and didn't, you then have to ask yourself the question, what is Malik Willis's role there for the future? So that's 1 out of 32. And obviously there aren't 32 places that have quarterback questions, but I bet you could think of a good 10 or 12 that have legitimate quarterback questions. And Mike, you mentioned a minute ago about Carolina, and I totally understand everybody saying, yeah, well, the Saints are not going to trade Sean Payton within the division and everything. And that's logical, and that's probably correct. But just remember one thing. If Steve Wilks and the Carolina Panthers win in Tampa on Sunday, and if they host a playoff game, how in the world is that owner going to replace Steve Wilks after the season?
I think Wilks has already done enough to get the job. But you're right. If they win the division and host a playoff game, you can't not give Steve Wilks an opportunity to build on what he's done. The other wrinkle, too, with Payton to Carolina that I hadn't thought of, and somebody mentioned this to me the other day, it's one thing to say the Saints would never trade him there. It's another thing also to say Payton would go there. Would he ever go there and become enemy of the state in New Orleans and tarnish his legacy in New Orleans? You go from eating and drinking for free for life in New Orleans to having to have someone there as your food and drink tester if you go back to New Orleans, if you go coach the Panthers. So I don't think he wants to destroy his legacy. It's kind of like a Brett Favre to Minnesota type of a thing. And we know that rivalry. It is a strong one between Carolina and New Orleans. Now, it's not all that often that both teams are good, but that was one of the great rivalries in the NFL a few years ago when the Panthers were at their best with Cam Newton and the Saints were at their best with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. So that's another reason why Payton wouldn't go. But you're right, Steve Wilks may have already earned that job. If he gets to the playoffs, wins the division, hosts a playoff game, that job, I think, is his. So back to Brady. And, this is the other dynamic, Peter. I made the list earlier, posted it just before the show, of all the teams that could be interested in Derek Carr, assuming Derek Carr is interested in playing for someone other than the Raiders. He said earlier this year that it's Raiders or golf course. When Raiders slam the door in your face, you may change your assessment. But it dawned on me, most of the teams out there do not have what you would consider a fully and completely settled quarterback situation. And then there's a few teams like the Broncos who would like to have the option to try to find a different quarterback, but their hands are tied by the quarterback's contract. But there's a lot of teams that don't have a clear, obvious franchise quarterback and could be interested in Tom Brady, even on a short-term thing. Because, Peter, what does Tom Brady do? He puts asses in the seats. He puts money in the bank. He puts teams in prime time. He makes irrelevant teams relevant. You talk about the Titans. He and Mike Vrabel, former teammates in New England, good friends. The Titans are always just kind of like, who cares team. Well, all of a sudden they get Tom Brady. They go from being who cares to a team that everyone cares about, everyone pays attention to. Now, does Tom Brady think he can win there? That's part of it. But from the perspective of an owner that wants to dump a bunch of money Tom Brady's way, it's not just, well, are we going to win a Super Bowl with this guy? It's, we're going to fill our stadium. We're going to sell all of our stuff, all of our beer, all of our pretzel, all of our hot dogs, all of our shirts, all of our hats, all of our everything. We're going to make a ton of money with Tom Brady. And that business reality is going to make him attractive to other teams as well once he's free and clear from the Buccaneers.
Look, there's a reason why both Tennessee and Carolina, and Mike, you mentioned that about Carolina and Sean Payton. I'll just remind you of one thing. I will never forget, this is in May of 2008, when I was at home at my house in New Jersey and the phone rang, and it was Favre. And remember, he had retired in March, and Chris Mortensen had reported that he was thinking about coming back. And so it was my off season. I was working occasionally, but not hard. And the phone rang, and it was Favre, and basically saying, what do you think if I came back? And I said, wow. He said, and I had heard about the Minnesota stuff and all that. He said, just one thing to keep in mind. If you go to Minnesota, that kid in Ashwaubenon is going to rip the poster of Brett Favre off his wall and put it in the fireplace. And he did understand that. And obviously he ended up going to the Jets that first year, but then he went to Minnesota. And Mike, I think what you said, as much as I respect your right for saying it, is absolutely totally wrong about Payton and the Saints. And it's because, if you remember about Favre went to Minnesota, and when he came back to Green Bay, got booed vociferously. I think he played there twice. Got booed vociferously. People hated him. Signs about him, you traitor, all that stuff. But before this current Mississippi thing, when Favre stepped back into Lambeau Field, he got a thunderous ovation and never was heard a discouraging word. Now, there are going to be some who will never think the same of Favre for going to play for the Vikings, and I get it. But they are in the distinct minority. I don't know what would happen if Payton would go to Carolina, but all I know is this. If that job is open and that defense is pretty damn good, and you got a few pieces in place on offense, And if you could go there in a bad division, which the NFC South is right now, that is a bad division. I mean, don't you look at that and say, we can not only win the division, but we could make some noise in the playoffs if we had a powerful offense. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen. It might happen. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that I think in 2037, when Sean Payton walks back into the French Quarter after having coached for 3 years in Charlotte, I don't think people are going to tell him, hey, you bum, get out of here.
It's still a factor. It's a factor. And it's similar to the factor that the Saints wouldn't want to see him there. He's got to consider even the short-term hit to how he's perceived by Saints fans. And who knows, maybe it won't be 3 years. Maybe he'll do it for 10 years. Who knows how long he's going to be the coach of the Panthers if that would happen. But that all came up in our conversation because it's either New Orleans or Carolina. Of the spots out there where you see potential vacancies, Colts too. But I don't see it happening with the Colts. I think Jim Irsay is dead set on hiring Jeff Saturday, but that is one other potential location where you could thread the needle with Payton as the coach, Brady as the quarterback. And I also think that the Colts desperately want to get off of this aging quarterback every year, someone different every year, from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. But still, Tom Brady is going to create excitement. He's going to get you in prime time. He's going to fill your stadium, and he can still play. That's the bottom line. Steve Young had a great comment a few weeks ago when the Buccaneers played the Saints on Monday Night Football. People retire because they can't do it anymore. Tom Brady can still do it. And even though he said all along he's going to play until he's 45, everything he did to allow himself to play until he's age 45 allows him to play at 46, maybe 47, maybe 48. That arm is going to be there into his 50s. The legs will go, but he's already smart enough to know where he's going to go with the ball. He doesn't need 5 seconds of blocking. The ball's out. He knows before it's in his hands who's going to be open and where he's going to throw it. So I just think between the fact that he's not having that Willie Mays type of moment. I know he has some bad moments in games, and Sims does a good job of breaking them down and pointing them out. But, man, when you get to crunch time in a game, he morphs back into the Tom Brady of old. It just feels like Tom Brady in his prime when they're down 13, down 10, whatever, and it's the fourth quarter, and he goes into the hurry-up offense. He looks like the guy we've always seen, and I don't see him walking away while he can still play at the level he's playing at.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.